Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway.
Welcome back to Paris History, Avec, Hemingway, and today we're talking about the amazing museums in the Marais area, and Claudine is going to give us all the information about that.
Yeah, and one of the newest museums that was open in 2021 is a museum that everybody needs to go see if you haven't gone back to see it. It is the Carnavalet. It was originally opened in 1880 by Baron Haussmann, who spurred to have this idea of a museum dedicated to the history of Paris. But of course, it started much longer before that. The Hotel de Carnavalet was built in 1548 by Pierre Lescot, who of course did so much that we do love about the Louvre, under Henry IV. It was built for Jacques de Lagny, who served on the Parliament of Paris. And also it sat near a convent, the convent of Saint Catherine de Val des Écoliers, which basically covered most of this entire area of the Marais that we're going to visit today. It was surrounded by gardens inside courtyards. It had these huge courtyards with sculptures. And so he ended up having to work a deal to even have this built at the time. It ended up he added sculptures by Jean Goujon and Antoine Cossivot, who you see all of their great stuff in the Louvre as well. It got its name after 1578 when François de la Baume, who was the widow, Françoise, I should say, the widow of François de Carnavigny at Carnavalet. In 1652, Claude Beausoleil asked Francois Mansart to expand the size of the hotel, adding on another floor. But its most famous resident was the Marquise de Sévigné, who we did a whole episode about. She was amazing. She lived there from 1664 to 1695 and was known as the Lady of the Letters. In 1866, Haussmann suggested the city of Paris purchase the location to hold its collection that had been in the Hotel de Ville, but it didn't move it in time, and a lot of it was destroyed in the Commune that we talked about last week. The Hotel de Le Petier de Saint-Fargeau, who is also part of the museum and dates back to 1688. So there's two buildings that they ended up combining into one to create this museum because it ended up being so big. In 1895, it became part of the city of Paris and held the Historic Library of Paris until 1968. It became with the extension of the library, it became the Carnavalet, and just in 1989, so not that long ago. The collection dates back to Gallo-Roman times. It has paintings, furniture, sculptures, photography. It has amazing different special exhibits. They just did one in the spring about Marcel Proust, which was fantastic. It sits on the Rue de Sévigné, which was also named for the Marquise. She lived when she lived there, and it was before that it was named for St. Catherine. So poor St. Catherine, she got bumped out for Rue de Sévigné. But the museum is amazing. It is a free museum. It's open Tuesday through Sunday from 10 to 6. You used to still have to also, even though it was free, have a time ticket, but they've recently got rid of those. But before you go, maybe just keep an eye and check, because you don't want to get there and then be turned away. But the last time I checked, in this last time I was just there, you did not have to have the free ticket to get in. Around the corner from there, when we walk down the street, is a little tiny square, and it's absolutely one of my favorites. Is the Square Georges Quint. It was named for an early curator of the Carnavalet. The walls of the garden go right up against the museum, and when you're on the top floor of the museum, where it has the collection from the Revolution, you get a look down into it. It's pretty cool. It was opened in 1923. In the middle of it, there is a statue by Aristide Maillot, which you might recognize also from the statues in the Tuileries, close to the Arc de Triomphe de Carousel. It is a statue of L'Île de France. It is a woman with a scarf. She, there always is dark green, bronze. On the walls are pieces from the Hotel de Ville and the Tuileries, including the pediment of the Tuileries and clock. And there's also an oval rose window from the Hotel de Ville that still has the burn marks that are on there, which is always kind of striking to see. Around the corner, right next to it, is another square, the Square Leopold Achille. There is a statue of Pomone in there that was saved also from the Hotel de Ville fire. So even though the Hotel de Ville is gone and the Tuileries, we could still keep finding little pieces of it all over the city, which is kind of cool. There's a small alcove that's there in the corner against the wall that holds a little treat, because of Francois Premier, his symbol was the salamander, because it was supposed to be apparently a very strong animal that could withstand a lot, and that was his emblem. And so there's this little niche that's kind of there in the corner and has a little salamander on it that was dedicated to him. Leopold Achille was actually a perfume maker. He was a deputy mayor of the Marais in the 13th century. And this is where there was a huge vegetable garden dedicated to St. Catherine Abbey. And it's right around the corner from that. You go to the Rue de Parc Royal, that was renamed for the reminder of the Palais de Tournelle, which sat around here, which is where Henry II died. When you get around the corner, there's a little, another little place. It's all just kind of concrete. It's the Place de Thorigny. It's named for Jean-Baptiste Claude Lambert de Thorigny, real mouthful. He was a president of the Second Chamber in 1713. On the left is the Hôtel Libraire Bruant, built in 1685. He was the designer of Les Invalides. After his death, it became the National School of Bridges and Roads. Then it became a lock museum from 1976 to 2003, something that like Louis the 16th would have probably just lost it at. But now it only holds some small contemporary art exhibits. But the Rue de Thorigny, we are getting close to Picasso. But on the left-hand side is the Jardin Berthuil. And we did an episode a year and a half ago about Berthuil, and she was an amazing, amazing person. This garden was just opened in 2019. It's located right there in the shadows of the Picasso Museum. Berthuil, if you remember, besides her having your favorite name, she was Picasso's very first dealer in Paris. She found him when he first arrived in 1900, and she ended up starting to sell his paintings. She became a very close friend with all of these artists at the time, including Modigliani. She did his first and only exhibition of his pieces, but she wasn't even claimed on her own that she was a horrible businesswoman. So all of these artists were finding other people that would pay them more for their paintings. And so they all kind of abandoned her. But later in life, towards the end of her life, when she was sick and didn't have any money, they did huge sales raising money for her. So they all came back to help her, but she was an amazing woman. And there's this little tiny, and it's kind of funny. It's kind of like a stair step little garden that's all plants, and then there's some just kind of little hidden benches in it. It's really pretty. But right next to that is the Picasso Museum, and it is in the Hotel Salé. It was built in 1658 for Pierre Aubert Sernier de Fortenay. He was a salt tax collector, and that made him very wealthy. And so you might think salt, that's kind of crazy, but if you've heard the term, they're worth their salt, that term comes from basically, at one point, salt wasn't a very, very expensive commodity to have. So when somebody was worth their salt, it meant that they were worth a lot. And the word salary comes from salt.
Well, you learn something new every day.
Learn something new every day. But he made obviously a lot of money when you see this building. The architect Jean Boulier designed this grand mansion. And Gaspard and Balthazar Marcy took care of all the sculpture. There's a sphinx on the outside of the building. It's really cool. But he was friends with the Nicolas Fouquet, who's another person I love to talk about. his fate was sealed because he was friends with Nicolas Fouquet, who was, the Minister of Finance under Louis XIV. He threw the big party for him at Vaux-le-Vicomte, and Louis XIV thought, hey, how'd you get the money to pay for this? And everybody convinced Louis that he must have stole it from him. So Louis had him arrested, and he died in jail. And so anybody that was associated with him kind of got the same fate. Fortuny would land in jail alongside him. The hotel was seized in 1663, became the Embassy of Venice. Then it became the school where Balzac actually attended. And in 1964, it came into the hands of the city of Paris and began a 10-year-long restoration. Picasso died on April 8th, 1973 at 91 years old. So next year is going to be a pretty big anniversary. Within a year, a windfall of art came into the state's possession. In 1968, France passed a law that heirs could pay inheritance taxes with art. And of course, this isn't just like, hey, here's some paintings I did. Do you want these? They got to actually choose. It was kind of like, well, you could tell us, you could offer them, and we'll decide if we want them or not. Jacqueline, who was Picasso's widow, gave over 5,000 pieces. They were all selected by Dominique Bozeau, who was a curator of the National Museum at the time. And the collection also included his personal collection that included Renoir, Rousseau, Corot, Miro, Cezanne. In 1979, they restored the hotel to its original grandeur, and the museum opened on September 28th, 1985. In 1986, when Jacqueline died, even more of his works were donated. It's a really fantastic museum to go. It's really, really well done because they own so much. They actually turn out even the permanent collection pretty much every year to year and a half. Recently, his first daughter, Maya, donated 9 more pieces to the museum. There's a huge exhibit going on right now until December 31st of this year dedicated to that collection. It's really, really cool. They do a really good job with his pieces and with the exhibit. He also, what I'm obsessed with is his collection that he did based on Manet's Déjeuner sur l'herbe. And so I love going there at least once a year because usually there's new versions of it that they had in storage that they bring out. It's a really, really cool, well done museum. Just on the other side of that is the Jardin de l'Hôtel Salé. It was done back in 1984 and was dedicated to the surrealist painter Lenore Fine. It was right around the edge of the Picasso Museum. When you're standing in the museum, you can look down and see it. And so it's really cool. Also in the area, very close to that, is the Musée Cognacq, that is just on the Rue Elsnevers, and is a free museum open to the public from Tuesday through Sunday from 10 to 6. We did the episode about that couple because they are the ones that first originally created the Saint-Martin department store, which is just absolutely gorgeous and amazing if you haven't gone in there to see it redone. We'll walk around the corner from the museum, and it's to the Rue Vieille du Temple. It dates back to 1256. At number 79 on the Rue de Ville du Temple is the Hotel de Montemort. It was built in 1623 for Jean-Albert de Montemort. His son Henri Louis took over the home, and it created the Academy of Science, which is where Molière, Descartes all had been gone to school for a period of time. His vast collections of books was later purchased by Colbert and are now held in the Bibliothèque Nationale. Just a little farther down at number 71 is the Hotel Saint-Aignan, who is now used for the Museum of Art and History of Judaism. It was built in 1645 for Claude de Mesnay. It was the home of Paul de Belleville of the Saint-Aignan, and it originally went to the Duc d'Anjou and Burgundy. So this is another part of the city. When people say, what's the oldest part of the city? I get asked that a lot when I give tours, and I would say a lot of it is in the Marais because it was untouched by housemen he basically stayed away from this. So you have all of these really small streets with a lot of these very, very old structures. On the corner of Rue de Ville and Francois is the Hotel Hérault, who was built in 16th century by Jean Hérault, who was the treasurer and secretary to the Duc d'Orléans. It is in Gothic style. On August 26, 1944, it was severely damaged by the German bombings of the Liberation, and 66 people were killed in the street, which was pretty horrible. The turret is still the original turret. Everybody, this is one of those pictures of a building you've seen over and over online on Instagram, but the turret itself is still original. There's also a very small church there on the Rue de France Bourgeois. Is number 53 is the Notre Dame des Blancs-Manteaux. It was built in 1685 and replaced the church that stood back there that was built in 1257. It was the servants of the Blessed Virgin. They wore white coats, which is why it is named the Blanc Manteau. On the south of the facade, it was added that the Église Saint-Ouli was built there. The pulpit dates back to 1749, is from the Flemish school, and it was originally brought from Belgium in 1864 and is topped with a statue of Saint Michel slaying the dragon. I always love finding those. St. Anthony Padoue is there he's standing there, the statue with child. He's the one that always has the very interesting and they have a certain name for it, but it's when the top of their head is completely shaved. So they almost have like a halo of hair around their head. It's really not a good style. It's the former church was where they brought the body of Louis I d'Orléans, who was killed by his cousins, which was ordered by his cousin Jean Saint-Peur, who was a Duke of Burgundy. Louis was a younger brother of Charles VI. On November 23rd, 1407, just outside the doors of the church, Louis was basically attacked by 22 men and killed. They ambushed him, killing him. It was what would start the war that would last between the branches of the Valois for decades. His wife, Valentine Visconti, who is one of the statues of the 20 women in the Jardin de Luxembourg that we have talked about. Valentine Visconti, tried everything she could do to avenge the death of her husband by his cousin. And so she never was able to do it, but she died a year later. Right there also, this is the whole area. This is where the convent was. At number 57, the convent stretched all the way to here. But behind a red door, the Pierre Avant Tower of the Philippe Auguste wall was there. It dates back to the 13th century. If you catch it at just the right spot in between the buildings, you can actually see it. On the right is another museum that very few people will actually go to, but definitely pop into here. It's not going to take you a lot of time, but it's absolutely gorgeous. At number 16 is the Hotel Soubi, which is the National Archives. The National Archives are made up of multiple buildings that are right here in this, but you will go into the main one, the Hotel de Soubi. It was created and built where the Hotel de Clisson de Laval. Oliver de Clisson was the constable of France at the time, and he had a mansion built here in 1371, which was just outside the wall of Philippe Auguste, which we could actually literally see the edge of the wall. It came back into the hands of the French to Francois de Lorraine, who was a Duc de Guise, who married the granddaughter of Louis XII, Anne d'Este. Over time, the two hotels were combined. Today, only the door and the double turret are still visible from the original one dating back to the 14th century. In 1700, the hotel and property were sold to Francois de Rohan-Soubi and de Rohan-Chabot, then had much of the building redone because a lot of it was completely falling apart, adding on the colonnade in 1704. The hotel became quite the place to be in Paris. They would have lavish salons there. During the revolution, it was used for the government's office that almost destroyed the interior. And in 1808, Napoleon decreed the property be a home of the Imperial Archives. Over time, the archives grew, and Louis XVIII and Napoleon III built up an annex and added even more. If you go inside, you go in, when you go straight in, there's a bunch of different books and stuff that are under cases, but it's amazing. There's like, you could see things all the way back from like, going all the way back to Louis the Ninth of things that they wrote, these documents that are under cases. And if you go upstairs, you actually go into what was the old part of the hotel. And there's these stretches of like 3 or 4 rooms, and they're absolutely beautiful. There is a huge round one on the corner, and the ceiling is like Tiffany blue, and the ceiling is absolutely beautiful, and the Tiffany blue, and then has all this white carved woodwork in it and this beautiful chandelier. It's absolutely just amazing.
Oh,
Oh, it's really, really cool. And if you keep going around the corner, you go into this room that's basically just where a lot of the archives are. And of course, you can't just grab things off the shelf, but they're all kind of hidden behind glass. But there's a glass double-sided kind of a picture frame, that's a long picture frame in the center of the room. And it is the original letter, the last letters of Louis the 16th and Marie Antoinette.
no way.
You could actually see it in their actual handwriting. So it's pretty. When I first saw it, I just about died.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it's super, super cool. So definitely go in there. Again, it's one of those museums that nobody's going to be at. It is just down the street from the Carnavalet. It's definitely worth going in to check it out. It goes all the way back. There's multiple buildings there. There's even a more contemporary building, but the gardens itself are really pretty. So it's a really pretty place to just go and sit, go to the Carnavalet, go someplace, pick up some, a jambon beurre, go over there, sit there in the garden and have your lunch, and then go into the Archives. Sounds like a pretty perfect day to me.
Yeah, let's relive it.
Yeah, let's relive it. Right outside the door as well is just walk around the corner a little bit, and you're going to find a little fountain that's kind of randomly in it doesn't look like it's where it should be. It's kind of at the edge of just kind of a place, and it's in front of a restaurant. It's the Fontaine de Audriette. It was built in 1764. It replaced a previous 17th century fountain. It was done by Pierre-Louis Moreau d'Esparro and was set against the building. In 1933, it was moved to this current location when they decided to widen the street. In the center above it is a lion, the face of a lion, and then also a bas relief of a nymph by Pierre-Philippe Mignon, laying among the reeds and an urn. It's kind of neat. I sat at the restaurant there one day and just sat there and looked up at the fountain the entire time.
And why wouldn't you?
Yeah. But this is the whole area right here is really, really cool. There's also another very favorite museum that just recently reopened after a restoration. And this is kind of the museum that all of the people that live in Paris, this is the one they go to. It was built in 1651. The building itself, it's the Hotel de Jouvengeau. It is along with the Hotel du Magnon, and it is the two buildings combined to create the Musée de la Chasse et de la Nature. Have you been there?
I actually shot an event there for the American Women's Group. It was very cool.
Yeah, it is basically the hunting museum. Yeah. And while some people, when I tell them that, when I'm doing trip planning for people and I say, this is what you have to go to, some of them really turn their noses up to it, but it's not like gross and gory when you say hunting. It's really, really cool. The building itself, the other building was built in 1705. And belonged to the former secretary of King Louis XIV, Michel de Olivet. In 2002, the Fondation de la Maison de la Chasse purchased the property, and in 2007, the museum opened. It currently was closed during COVID. It closed in 2019. It was supposed to open, of course, that next spring, but it just opened last year, of course, with everything that happened with COVID. But it's really, really cool. They do some special exhibits there. The first time I went there was when everything in Paris, they were honoring like the big anniversary of the alliance of France and Japan, of like when France was first open for Japanese visitors to come. And they had these like full, like life size, obviously taxidermied like deer and elk. And it was this Japanese artist, and he completely covered it with these like glass orbs. And it was the coolest thing that I've ever seen. And they had like it's like trophies on the wall that were done like that, and the huge full-size ones. It was really, really cool. And I'll definitely put some pictures on my website of it. But I love that museum. I have not gone back since they reopened, but I can't wait to go see it in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how it's changed. I've been there a long time.
Yeah, I think like it was kind of when I went there, some of it was like just the flow of it was kind of random, but it's also two buildings, it's two old homes that were combined. So you're already going to have some, it's not going to completely flow perfectly when you're combining literally two structures.
Definitely.
But it's really cool. And all the special exhibits, of course, have to do with animals. But it's kind of like, it's one of those where it's like you're walking into somebody's home where, when it's hunting, it's, there are taxidermied animals, but there's also tons and tons of artwork featuring animals. There's also the small room that is has rifles in it and guns, which at first I thought, oh, whatever. And then when you really look at them, I mean, they're not like contemporary ones. They're really old ones. So you see like these beautiful carved silver, rifles that belong to Louis the 14th. It's actually, they're kind of works of art. It was actually really cool.
Yeah, I definitely recommend visiting. It's not like you think like gory like people think. Like it's really pretty inside.
Yeah, it's really cool inside. So I'm excited to go back and check it out and see how it's changed. It is one of those smaller museums. You don't necessarily have to have a ticket in advance for it. And also I was trying to buy one for a client for about 4 months and you couldn't even buy a ticket online. Something was wrong with their website. It's easily like one of those, like if you want to go to the museums in this area, I would do first thing in the morning, I'd go to buy your ticket for Picasso, because that's going to be the most popular. Go into with a time ticket into Picasso. And then after that, the Carnival is busy in the morning, but it's better in the afternoon. You could kind of then visit all of these. I could only do about 2 of these museums a day because I go to a museum. I spend about 4 hours looking at every single thing and taking photos and making notes. So I get kind of museumed out after 5 hours. Just like Giuseppe. But it's really cool. This is a great little area to catch a bunch of different things and periods of time all at once.
And definitely worth a visit.
Yes, for sure.
Well, guys, I hope you will listen to Claudine's information and take it and run and go visit everything and check out her website, ClaudineHemingway.com. And she does travel planning. She does private tours. She does live virtual tours on Sundays. So check them all out and tune in next week.
Thank you for listening to Paris History Avec a Hemingway. If you want to find out some more, you could always find me on my Instagram page, Claudine Bleu Blanc Rouge, and that's BLEU, as in the French way to spell it. And each day I post a daily history lesson about a person or a place or something in Paris, or it's lots of fun facts. And then also at ClaudineHemingway.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter there.